Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Jack Abbott had spent decades fighting the Newman empire, but nothing in all those years of bitter rivalry compared to the quiet storm gathering now, a storm so dangerous, so catastrophic, that even he, proud, stubborn, battle-scarred Jack, knew he couldn't face it alone, and that realization was exactly what brought him before dawn to the dimly lit rooftop bar overlooking Genoa City, where Adam Newman sat hunched over a tumbler of whiskey, staring at the skyline with the vacant eyes of a man who had been gutted from the inside. Adam barely acknowledged Jack's arrival, muttering that if Jack was here to gloat about Newman's downfall, he'd chosen the right moment because Victor's empire, once unbreakable, was now trembling on the edge of bankruptcy after a financial catastrophe that no one, not even the great Victor Newman, could spin, bully, or outmaneuver his way out of, and the irony was that Adam, despite all the betrayals he'd endured from his father, felt sick watching the empire crumble, even though part of him knew he should feel vindicated. Yet the panic in the corporate world, the vultures circling Newman Enterprises, the whispers of federal investigations, hostile takeovers, breached contracts, and offshore financial black holes made Adam feel something else entirely. Fear for the company, for their name, for Connor's future, and maybe, though he'd never admit it, fear for Victor himself. But Jack wasn't here to revel in any of this, nor was he here to push Adam back into the flames of Newman family dysfunction. He was here because the collapse of Newman wasn't just a Newman problem, it was a Genoa City problem, an economy problem, a Jabot problem. And though he hated to admit it, an Adam Newman problem too, and as Jack slid into the seat across from Adam, he confessed that the reason he sought him out wasn't to exploit the chaos but to propose something neither of them ever thought possible. An alliance, strategic and quietly executed, between Jabot and Adam, not against the Newmans, but to save Newman Enterprises before it dragged half the business sector down with it. Adam scoffed at first, refusing to believe Jack would ever want to save Victor's legacy, but Jack clarified sharply that he wasn't saving Victor, he was saving jobs, investments, local partnerships, and yes, even Adam. Because while Adam had been ostracized by the Newmans time and time again, Jack saw potential in him, a sharp mind, a man capable of navigating ruthless business storms, someone who knew Newman's internal operations better than anyone, and someone who could make decisions without being ruled by ego like Victor or consumed by fear like Nick. Victoria or even Nikki could be in times like this. Adam wanted to believe Jack, but his instincts screamed that trusting anyone, especially an Abbott, could be disastrous, yet Jack pressed on, revealing details he shouldn't have known, massive debt Victor had hidden, unsecured loans tied to ventures Newman should never have touched, confidential reports showing several key divisions were on the verge of collapse, and perhaps worst of all, evidence suggesting that someone inside Newman Enterprises had sabotaged financial safeguards right before a crucial merger, leaving the company exposed like a fortress with the gates wide open. Adam froze, his chest tightening, because sabotage inside Newman meant only one thing. Betrayal, but from whom? Victoria, who had always believed she was the rightful heir. Nick, who walked away and came back depending on Victor's approval. Nate, ambitious and increasingly unpredictable. Audra, ever calculating? Or someone else entirely, perhaps someone in accounting or legal, whose names never appeared in headlines yet held the power to sink the entire ship. Jack watched Adam process the information, and then pushed deeper, telling him he'd quietly traced the sabotage to someone who had used Adam's own credentials during the breach, meaning whoever did it wanted the world and Victor to believe Adam was the culprit, framing him as the one who burned the company down just to take revenge on his father. And the thought of Victor actually believing such a lie hit Adam like a bullet, because he knew Victor would believe it, knew Victoria would make sure of it, knew Nick wouldn't defend him, and Connor would grow up thinking his father was a corporate criminal. Rage began to crackle in Adam's veins as he demanded to know who Jack believed was responsible, but Jack refused to say yet, insisting that until they gathered hard evidence, Adam needed to trust him and work with him, forming what Jack called a shadow alliance, one that would operate beneath Victor's radar, beneath Victoria's suspicion, and beneath the public chaos engulfing Newman. And Adam, after years of being burned by everyone he tried to trust, felt something unfamiliar, the sense that Jack wasn't playing him, that this wasn't a trick or a setup or a chance to destroy Newman but something closer to a moral line Jack refused to cross, because Jack knew that as much as Victor had harmed the Abbotts, letting an entire corporate ecosystem collapse would harm thousands more. Adam finally asked Jack what exactly he wanted from him, and Jack slid a flash drive across the table containing documents Adam had never seen before. Internal Newman communications proving that the bankruptcy was not just the result of mismanagement but a deliberate destabilization that had been in motion for months, possibly orchestrated by someone with enough access to manipulate financial audits, erase digital footprints, and reallocate funds without tripping automatic alerts. Adam's stomach dropped as realization dawned that this wasn't a reckless scheme. It was a long game, calculated and ruthless, and the person behind it wanted Newman not just weakened but annihilated. And if the company went bankrupt, it wasn't just Victor's legacy that would burn, but Adam's name, Victoria's power, Nick's identity, and the lives of hundreds of employees. Jack took a slow breath and told Adam he needed someone on the inside, someone who wasn't blinded by loyalty to Victor or obsessed with power like Victoria, someone who could move quietly, infiltrate the departments where the sabotage occurred, gather unfiltered evidence, and feed it back to Jack so they could expose the real perpetrator publicly, protecting Newman while simultaneously restoring Adam's reputation. Adam considered the consequences. If Victor found out he'd aligned with Jack, he'd be disowned again. If Victoria found out, she'd spin it as treason. If the board found out, he'd be blacklisted forever. But if the saboteur succeeded, all of that would happen anyway, and worse, Connor would grow up thinking his father destroyed his own family's empire. So Adam, swallowing years of resentment and bitterness, nodded slowly and agreed to Jack's proposal, but warned Jack that once he stepped back into Newman, the wolves would be waiting. Victoria sharpening her knives, Nate gathering intel, Audra whispering schemes, Nick trying to keep peace while distrusting Adam's every move, and Victor himself, wounded pride festering as he searched for someone to blame. Within hours of Adam's return to the tower, whispers rippled through every floor, from legal to marketing to operations, as employees sensed something shifting in the air. Some watched with hope that Adam might stabilize the chaos, others with suspicion that he'd finish what the financial crisis had started, and Victoria, icy calm but deeply threatened, cornered Adam in the executive suite demanding to know what he was doing back. But Adam, armed with new resolve, simply replied that Newman needed someone who could save it, not someone obsessed with inheriting it. Meanwhile, Jack, working behind the scenes from Jabot, coordinated with a handful of trusted experts to map out the exact points where Newman's financial infrastructure had been breached, and each breadcrumb Adam uncovered, deleted emails, mismatched timestamps, forged approvals, led them closer to a shocking enemy, someone neither expected, someone whose name would rock Genoa City once exposed. As the investigation deepened, the situation worsened. News outlets leaked rumors of insolvency, investors panicked, stock prices freefell, and Victor, for the first time in decades, looked genuinely defeated as he struggled to keep the company afloat, even though he had no idea the real danger was coming from within his own walls. The deeper Adam and Jack dug, the more dangerous the alliance became, and soon the saboteur realized someone was investigating, retaliating by planting more false evidence, tying Adam to the missing funds, hacking into his personal accounts, and triggering an emergency audit that left the board questioning whether Adam's return had made things worse. Adam, feeling the walls close in, almost walked away, but Jack's determination didn't waver, reminding him that quitting now would mean letting the real traitor win, leaving Newman to collapse and Victor to blame Adam forever. And so Adam pushed harder, following clues that finally led to the unthinkable revelation. Someone who had built an entire identity around loyalty, someone Victor trusted implicitly, someone who had been playing both sides for years, orchestrating chaos for personal gain and hidden alliances, someone who stood to benefit massively if Newman imploded. And when Adam brought the evidence to Jack, the two men stared at each other in stunned silence, realizing they were now holding a bomb that could destroy not just a company, but a family dynasty. As the bankruptcy hearing approached and Victor prepared to make the most humiliating public appearance of his life, Adam and Jack faced a choice: expose the truth now and risk a corporate bloodbath, or wait for the perfect opening that could save the company and take down the saboteur without collateral damage. And in that moment, an unlikely bond began to form between them, not friendship, not trust, but mutual purpose, the knowledge that for the first time in a long time, they were fighting for the same thing. And while the world believed Newman was finished, while Victoria plotted her own path to power, while Nate positioned himself to jump ship, while Audra quietly maneuvered her influence, and while Victor braced himself for the public humiliation he'd spent his entire life avoiding, Adam and Jack prepared to execute a plan so seismic, so devastatingly precise, that once the truth came out, Genoa City would never be the same and the name Newman would either rise from the ashes stronger than ever, or burn in a downfall so explosive it would be remembered for decades, with Adam Newman standing at the center of the firestorm, as the unexpected savior Victor never saw coming. Adam Newman didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment, because the deeper he went into the data Jack had helped him uncover, the clearer it became that the entire foundation of Newman Enterprises had been under attack for months, slowly hollowed out by someone with both access and the psychological patience to sabotage the company from the shadows, never rushing, never slipping, always covering their tracks with surgical precision. The next morning, Adam walked into Newman Tower with a renewed but dangerous determination, his mind spinning with layers of strategy, fear, and a glimmer of something that felt like purpose, something he hadn't felt in years. And while employees whispered as he passed, while executives exchanged looks of panic and suspicion, while Victoria glared at him with the venom of someone defending a throne she believed was slipping from her fingers, Adam pushed forward because he knew he didn't have time to care about appearances, not when Newman was on the brink of collapse and the person responsible was still among them. Meanwhile Jack, operating from Jabot with the intensity of a man playing chess at a master level, sifted through old Newman legal files, digital correspondences, whistleblower reports, and internal audit trails that Victor had buried so deeply even board members never knew they existed. And the more Jack read, the more he realized that Newman had been vulnerable long before the current crisis, because while Victor was a titan of business, he was also a man who made enemies everywhere he went, and some of those enemies didn't die with time. They evolved, they learned, they infiltrated, and one of them had clearly found a way inside the Newman ranks. As the day progressed, Adam silently followed the trail of mismatched transactions and falsified approvals, tracing them through 4 departments: finance, internal affairs, research and development, and surprisingly, public relations, because the saboteur wasn't only manipulating the company's financial structure, they were shaping its public image, timing press leaks with suspicious accuracy so that every dip in Newman stock coincided with a leak of internal dysfunction, creating the appearance of a company spiraling out of control. Adam realized that whoever was orchestrating the attack wasn't just dismantling Newman, they were manipulating the entire narrative, framing the downfall as a result of internal incompetence, which suggested the perpetrator wanted the world to believe Victor's empire had died naturally, not from sabotage. Back at the ranch, Victor Newman sensed the world closing in on him, the weight of impending bankruptcy, federal scrutiny, and public humiliation clawing at his pride. And even though he didn't yet know the full scope of betrayal happening under his roof, he felt the sting of failure in every breath he took, pacing the great room like a caged predator, refusing to admit, even to himself, that he was losing control. Nikki watched him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion, terrified of what this level of stress could do to Victor's health, but knowing better than to interfere while he was locked in battle mode, because Victor Newman in crisis was both unstoppable and unpredictable, willing to scorch the earth if it meant protecting his legacy. Victoria, meanwhile, had begun plotting her own version of salvation, not for the company, but for herself, quietly arranging meetings with board members, murmuring about temporary leadership restructuring, and preparing to use the bankruptcy as an excuse to push Victor aside and declare herself the rightful leader who could stabilize the Newman brand. Yet she knew Adam's return threatened that plan, which is why she stormed into Adam's office that afternoon, eyes blazing like wildfire, demanding to know what he was hiding and insisting that if he was working with Jack Abbott, she would expose him to the world. But Adam dismissed her accusations with a calmness that infuriated her even more, telling her that if she stopped focusing on her power fantasies and actually looked at the numbers, she'd see the company was being gutted from within. Victoria, of course, refused to believe anything Adam said, convinced that he was somehow behind the chaos, because to her, Adam was always the problem, always the sibling who brought destruction, even though she failed to see that it was her own ambition, her own hunger for dominance, that blinded her to the truth unfolding right under her nose. Later that evening, Adam met Jack in a secluded conference room at the athletic club where Jack presented a new bombshell, a series of wire transfers from Newman's emergency reserve accounts funneling money into shell corporations, some linked to obscure investment firms, others tied to international accounts, but all leading back to one central hub, an entity created 2 years earlier that Jack suspected was a front used by the saboteur to drain Newman's liquidity. The truly chilling part was that the shell companies didn't just benefit from the money. They controlled votes from several smaller shareholders, meaning the traitor had been quietly building influence within Newman's structure long before the attack began. Adam stared at the documents with growing disbelief, knowing that this conspiracy was more sophisticated than anything he had imagined, and when Jack revealed that the same entity had also attempted to purchase Jabot last year through an offshore intermediary, Adam understood the scale of what they were facing. Someone wasn't just trying to destroy Newman, they were trying to monopolize Genoa City's corporate landscape entirely, and the attempted Jabot acquisition was a test run, a warning Jack hadn't recognized until now. As Adam and Jack pieced together the puzzle, another revelation surfaced. Several of the financial breaches had been executed using biometric clearance codes that required in-person verification, meaning the traitor wasn't hiding behind a remote terminal or a stolen password. They were physically entering secured areas inside Newman Tower, passing through multiple layers of identification only someone trusted could access. Adam's mind spun through a list of names. Victoria, too obvious and too public. Nick, incapable of this level of cruelty. Nate, ambitious but not experienced enough to pull off corporate espionage at this level. Audra, sharp and ruthless but currently preoccupied with her own political maneuvers. And others, lower-level executives, longtime employees, legal advisors. Any one of whom could be hiding a second life. The next day, as news networks reported that Newman Enterprises had filed an emergency petition to delay the bankruptcy hearing, tension smothered the entire city, with reporters camped outside the tower, investors fleeing in droves, and the board on the verge of mutiny, claiming Victor's leadership had become too unpredictable, too emotional, and too dangerous for the stability of the company. Victor, infuriated and humiliated, held a private meeting with the board, exploding at them for daring to question his authority, but for the first time, his intimidation fell flat, because the board had numbers, projections, and evidence, and Victor had only bluster and pride. And Nikki watched in horror as the man she loved cracked under the pressure. While Victor was fighting for control, Adam slipped into the restricted financial archives, using a backdoor pass Jack had secured, and discovered a hidden subfolder encrypted with a code that seemed random, until he realized the numbers matched the birth date of someone no one would suspect. Someone who had been in the Newman orbit long enough to understand every weakness, every blind spot, every point where Victor underestimated them. With trembling hands, Adam decrypted the files, revealing detailed plans outlining every phase of the company's destruction. The timed press leaks, the forged documents, the manipulated accounts, the internal conflicts exploited like pressure points, all leading toward a coordinated takeover bid set to launch the moment Newman officially declared bankruptcy. Adam's breath hitched as he scrolled through the documents, recognizing phrases and strategic terms used by only one person, a master manipulator, someone capable of waiting years to strike, someone who had built themselves into a trusted figure while hiding a ruthless core. Adam immediately contacted Jack, his voice low and shaken, telling him he found something huge, something that proved the traitor had planned everything down to the hour. But before Adam could reveal the name, the lights in the archive room flickered, the door locked from the outside, and a chilling realization washed over him. The saboteur knew he was onto them. Trapped and isolated, Adam attempted to override the lock, but the system rejected all commands, and a minute later, smoke began seeping from the vents, proof that whoever orchestrated this was willing to eliminate him to protect their plan. Panic clawed at Adam's throat as he pounded on the door, coughing, stumbling, realizing he had underestimated the depth of this conspiracy. But moments before he collapsed, the door burst open. Jack had arrived with hotel security after tracking Adam's phone, dragging him out of the smoke-filled room and into the hallway where Adam gasped for air, telling Jack through clenched teeth that this wasn't sabotage anymore. This was attempted murder. Once Adam recovered enough to speak, he revealed the horrifying truth. The person behind it all was someone they had both trusted, someone who had rebuilt their public image over the last 2 years, someone who had been granted access to Newman Tower, Jabot, and Chancellor Winters, someone who had quietly inserted themselves into every major business decision in Genoa City, someone whose ambition had no moral boundaries, and as Adam whispered the name, Jack's face drained of color, realizing that this wasn't just a corporate takeover. It was an all-out war, and the battle was far from over because now the traitor knew Adam and Jack were working together, which meant the next move would be more vicious, more desperate, and far more dangerous, setting the stage for a showdown that would shake Genoa City to its core. And while Victor remained unaware of the full truth, while Victoria schemed to seize control, while Nikki worried the stress would kill her husband, while Nick tried to keep the peace, and while the board prepared for a coup, Adam and Jack understood that time was running out, and if they didn't strike soon, if they didn't expose the traitor before the bankruptcy hearing, then Newman Enterprises would fall, Jack's company would be next, and the person responsible would walk away with everything, leaving the town, the families, and the legacy of both dynasties in ruins.